But when you're not successful, when you're very early on, and when you're trying to figure out product market fit, that's where you need the money the most, because you're like, using your credit card debt or stuff that you shouldn't do, but you're doing it anyway. And it's impossible to get people to trust you. Well, you can get friends and family to trust you, but that's it. People who are going to invest in you because they know you and they think you can do something with that, but they don't even. Usually those people don't even understand what you're doing. They just trust you and they invest on your head. So that's always my advice for aspiring entrepreneurs. Build a plan that does not require funding, and fund your growth and your evolution, your business evolution, with your customers' credit cards or your customer checkbooks, but not someone else's investment.
Welcome back to The In Factor, where we dig into the mindset and methods that shape the entrepreneurial journey. I'm your host, Dr. Rebecca White, and today's guest is someone who understands both the art and science of building a business in the digital age. Emeric Ernoult is the co-founder and CEO of Agorapulse, a global social media management platform built with one thing in mind: results. What stood out to me in our conversation was a clear and consistent focus on outcomes. In a world where we often get lost in the noise of social media, counting likes, views, and followers, Emeric brings us back to what truly matters. What are you getting in return? And I know I can speak from my own experience. I personally don't love social media, but I know it's something I need to be doing. I know it's where I need to build a relationship with my market and with my ideal customer. But I often don't know what all of that effort, all that time, energy, and in many cases money is bringing back to my business. And it's been something that I've been focused on more and more recently, looking at the metrics and understanding who you are, those of you who are out there listening and watching. So, Emeric taught me a lot, and I think you'll learn a lot from it as well. His insights on measuring ROI using data to guide decisions and building systems at scale are not just helpful, they're game changers. And we covered a lot about social media, but the other really interesting thing about this podcast that I loved is that Emeric is in Paris. And he's been in the United States. He went to school here and he worked here, but he also went to school in France, and he is building his business there. And so we had the chance to talk about mistakes that people make when they want to take their business to an international scale. And, the reality is on social media, we're already have that opportunity to be talking to an international audience. So here's your mindset moment for today. Data doesn't limit creativity, it sharpens it. When you track what works and why, you stop guessing and you start growing. ROI isn't just a finance term. It's your compass for clarity, focus, and freedom. So before we jump in, one more thing I want to mention. We're launching the EI Lab, a brand new online learning experience unlike anything else that you've ever seen before. And it's really focused on helping you build your entrepreneurial intelligence by learning from the collective stories and insights of hundreds of entrepreneurs and researchers. So I'll be sharing more about that in the coming weeks and on my own social media, but trust me, I think you'll want to be a part of it. Now let's get on to this powerful conversation with Emeric Ernoult. Emeric, thank you for joining me today on The In Factor.
Well, you're welcome, Rebecca. I'm excited to be here. Very happy. A little jet lagged, like I said, but very happy.
Yeah, we were just talking before we went on air to record that I visited your country, France, this summer, and you came here to the United States, and you just finished your trip, right? And you saw the national parks, and yeah. Well, we live in a beautiful world, and I love travel, and I know you're located in Paris now, and I always love to kind of dig into your background. I know you've been a lawyer, and now entrepreneur, and it kind of looked like you moved from focusing on Facebook to a much broader audience, but you're the co-founder of Agorapulse, if I read that all that correctly. And so I want to absolutely dig into some of your background. Did you grow up in France?
I was born in New York.
Okay.
My parents used to live in the US. They lived there for 7 years. And I then left the US for Nigeria, where we lived for 2 years, and then for Senegal, where we lived for 4 years. So I was born in New York, then moved to Africa for 6 years, and moved back to the north of France, where my parents were from. And, all the studies and everything, I ended up studying law and passing the bar and becoming a lawyer. I did that. I started my career at the French Embassy in Washington, D.C. I worked for a law firm in D.C. for a couple of years. Then I went back to their Paris office, worked there for a couple of years as well. Was an amazing job, very interesting, but I was missing the thrill of building something for myself. Yeah, I needed more than lawyering, if I can put it this way. So that's how I transitioned to entrepreneurship with my co-founder of 25 years, Ben, who was my CTO. He left the company 2 years ago to pursue other ventures, but it was his technical skills and my not so great business skills at the time, but they became great over time. That came up to build the first business that did last for 10 years. That was the technology to build your own social network, basically, if I make it super TLDR. And after that, we pivoted to Agorapulse, which was in the early days, software to help you build contests and promotions on Facebook. And obviously, as you may know, it's not that anymore. And now it's a full-blown social media management suite. And that's a transition, a pivot that we've made over 3 years from 2012 to 2015. And since 2015, it's been a social media management suite that evolved over time, obviously, and improved over time, and transition from SMB, full product led, full SEO inbound to more of a sales and marketing driven go to market. And that's where we are today, basically. $25 million of annual recurring revenue. We have 170 team members across the world, around the world. And what else can I say that's interesting?
Well, that's pretty interesting. I love there's several things there to dig into. I understand now why your English is much better than my French. So you spent time here in the US and traveled all around the world. And one of the things that I've noted with a lot of entrepreneurs is that they're very curious, period. And I think growing up in a family like that took you around the world, gave you a very probably different perspective than maybe some of the other people that you've worked with or known over the years. Do you think that curiosity has been a part of this long journey that took you from being a business lawyer?
Yeah, curiosity,
Going today?
definitely. Yeah. It's definitely part of my DNA. I think every business builder is a curious person, because if you're not curious, building a business is too painful. So
That's right. That's
you
right.
probably don't want to do that. It's what you learn in the process that makes it worth it, in my opinion. Not the money, not the fame, not all the stuff that you usually don't get, because most people don't get rich or famous thanks to their business building.
Right.
But yeah, the learning is really what makes it worth the while.
Did your parents value learning? Was that a part of, because I grew up in a family where I love learning too. And I grew up in a family where my parents believed in learning, and my brother and I both pursued a lot of advanced education, but learning through life has been so much fun.
Yeah, they definitely supported the learning through education, for sure. Like everything education related, they paid for. Like they said, you have no budget for your personal stuff, your vacation, your fun, your entertainment, but you have unlimited budget for
Yeah.
education and learning. So definitely that was a piece. But I also think that my parents encouraged me to have an open mind, and directly or indirectly, willingly or unwillingly. Having you born in the US, unwillingly created a will inside to discover the country, the culture, the language. Like really, when you have New York on your birthplace, on your passport, it does something to you. It cannot not influence you.
Yeah.
if you had Paris as your birthplace and your passport, you probably would have loved to see that city and that culture earlier in your life, because you would say, that's where I was born. I want to know more about it. I want to learn language. I want to understand how this is a route for me. So that definitely that was a huge drive in the way I built my life, for sure. Obviously, going to Africa right after that, completely the opposite, like complete
Right.
mass chaos, but beautiful people, beautiful countries, and so many things to discover and view as well. And it's forcing you to have a very open mind, because the way they live and the way things are working there is so messy that you have to have an open mind. If you have a closed mind, Africa is not a place for you.
Right.
And
Right.
obviously, it opened my mind to all these things are normal. Like traveling the world, normal. Speaking multiple languages and other than your own native language, normal. Like it made normal things that are not normal for many people. And obviously that helped me create a business that was not French only, but was English only, that was very focused with building an international presence, having an international team. So all these things were part of what my parents gave me, for sure. Yeah.
That's really, and we live in an international world. So, that I think that's really powerful and helpful. So let me take you back. You went, like me, you went through a lot of years of education, because to become a lawyer, that's required. And did you go to law school in the US, or was that in
No.
Europe?
Yeah, it was all in France. Yeah.
Yes. So you went to law school and then you became an entrepreneur. Reflecting back, was there a pivotal moment that sort of drove you to this, or that led you, let me put it that way? Maybe it wasn't driving you, maybe it was leading you to this life of entrepreneurship.
Yeah. So when you make life changing decisions like that, there is always either a pull or a push. It's
Yeah.
either you want to leave something or you want to go to something. For me, it was really a pull, not a push. But it's actually an interesting question, because I went through a very, very clear thought process to decide whether or not I should leave the legal profession. What you need to understand is that when I was 27, I was making $15,000 a month. So I was paid very, very well for a 27-year-old, and I was very successful in the job. I had already brought customers to the firm, clients to the firm. I got very large bonuses for that. So I was my early financial and career success as a lawyer was tremendous. It was really above average. And I kind of had the feeling that, okay, well, I'm done. I've had success now. What's next? Well, now I have to wait to be 40 years old. I was 27, so I was very young. I have to wait to be 40 years old to become a partner and have a little bit of gray hair, which I still don't have enough of,
Good for you.
at
Good for you.
53. And it's too long. And I actually realized and understood that I wanted to build my own thing. I wanted to have control over my destiny. I started thinking, if want to do that, I have two choices. I either build my own law firm and I stay in the legal business, but I build my own law firm and my own company in the law business, or I go and do something completely different. And when I started weighing the pros and cons of building your own law firm or building something else, my thought process at the time was the problems are going to be the same. The difficulties, the pains, the struggles, the roadblocks are going to be the same. You need to find customers. You need to find employees. You need to retain employees. You need to deal with HR issues. You need to chase the money and get your bills paid at the end of the month. All this stuff that you have to do as an entrepreneur, you have to do as a law firm owner as well. The same thing. But you'll have very little of the upsides. The upsides when you're an entrepreneur and building a business, that's product based and not service based. Or the upsides are more freedom, theoretically. Very theoretical. I learned that later.
I know. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I hear that from students all the time, that they want freedom, and they want freedom and be their own boss. And then they
Yeah.
realize that every customer becomes your
When you're
boss.
on boss, you're a slave of something else. But it's not of a boss, but sometimes it's worse.
That's
Because
right.
if you have a good boss, it can be a great protection. And I realized that I wanted the upside. So I wanted to build something that I was not a slave of, i.e. a team could run the thing without me, which now is becoming a reality for me more and more. But it took a long time, very long time. And I wanted to build an asset that has a value of its own that I could resell, maybe retire on. A law firm is pretty hard to sell because it's so linked to yourself and your name and your brand as a lawyer. And I was seeing that in all the partners I was working at the time and very well-known lawyers that I knew that, people came to work. I want to work with lawyer X, Mr. or Mrs. X, because I saw them in the news. I heard they're great. Someone recommended them to me and so on and so forth. I didn't want to build a business that relied on my brand and my name to grow and be strong and be valuable. So I weighted those and I said, long term, it's a better bet to build a product business than a service business like a law firm. And that's how I made my choice.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. There are ways, I think, to turn a service into a product. And that in many ways, that's what you're doing right now because you you provide services through products that you've developed. So that's one of the things I advise a lot of students or aspiring entrepreneurs to think about how they can productize, because I agree with you. It's very difficult to scale something when you're the product.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about that. Building that business, you've had some pivots along the way. And you talked early on about learning and how entrepreneurship is a learning journey. And one of the things that I think stops a lot of entrepreneurs is they think, or prospective entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs, is that they think they have to know it all. And you never do. And you never do, right? So let's talk a little bit about how your company has evolved over the years. And well, before we do that though, let's talk about financing your company. I think I read that you bootstrapped it. So talk to us about how you got started and how you financed it and how you thought about financing it, and then sort of how you have evolved over the years.
Sure. First of all, most companies are bootstrapped. I'd say 99.99% of businesses in the world never get access to any kind of financing of any sort. So if you want to build a business, it's probably much better to have a plan that does not require financing. Because if your plan to build a business requires financing, then you have 99.99% chances of failure because you're not going to get financed.
It's hard. It's very hard.
So it's definitely what I experienced. We tried to raise money several times and we were rejected until we got success. So basically, if you are successful, they're going to raise money. But it's like,
You don't
bank.
need money. You can get
Yeah,
money.
you don't need the money that now. So we rejected those investment proposals. But when you're not successful, when you're very early on, and when you're trying to figure out product market fit, that's where you need the money the most because you're like, using your credit card debt or stuff that you shouldn't do, but you're doing it anyway. And it's impossible to get people to trust you. Well, you can get friends and family to trust you, but that's it. People who are going to invest in you because they know you and they think you can do something with that, but they don't even. Usually those people don't even understand what you're doing. They just trust you and they invest on your head. So that's always my advice for aspiring entrepreneurs. Build a plan that does not require funding and fund your growth and your evolution, your business evolution with your customers' credit cards or your customer checkbooks, but not someone else's investment.
I have to ask you, I know I'm asking you a two-part question, but on this part of the question, I'm very curious about France versus the US. You're very familiar with US, and I know your legal practice, I think you worked US and France. How do the two countries compare from an entrepreneurship perspective and maybe from a startup perspective?
Yeah. I'd say they have different constraints, and one has the advantages that the other doesn't have, and vice versa. The US has the great employees in the US are very, very expensive. Great employees in France are less expensive. So you can have great people for less money in France, in Europe in general, but in France for sure. That's number one. If you have very skilled people and they are pretty good with languages in general, not everyone, but in general, you can get people who speak English, German, other language, Spanish, other languages from in France that are going to help you, which you're not going to find in the US. Nobody's going to speak anything else but English in the US for sure. So if you want to go international early on, it's definitely going to be easier if you are in a European country because having multiple languages under your belt is almost a necessity because our HR markets are too small on their own to be enough to build the businesses we want to build. The difficulty in France is going to be everything HR related, everything, labor law and all that kind of stuff is a total nightmare. And the level of taxation, depending on the state you are. If you're in California, you're paying a lot of taxes, probably more than in France. But if you're in Nevada or in Florida,
I'm in
or Texas,
Florida,
you're
yes.
paying a lot less taxes than we do here. So for sure, that's the thing. The one thing I love about the US is that the US, from where I see things, obviously it's a perspective, but is very entrepreneur friendly and business owner friendly, where France as a country, as a culture, is not very entrepreneur and business owner friendly. They say they are, but what I usually say is that they are friendly until you're successful. Once you're struggling in the trenches and it's really hard and you don't make money and you're poor, they love you. Once you get rich, they hate you. So that's the problem with the, the French culture in general. So there's a love-hate relationship with success and financial success more particularly. And I think that's what makes the US so much better when you're aspiring to be successful, is that people are going to celebrate your success, not tell you that you should give all your money to the state or
That celebration thing is kind of interesting because I have a student in Finland, a former student in Finland. And that's been one of her frustrations, is that when she was here in school, entrepreneurship and success as an entrepreneur was celebrated.
Yeah.
And the stories were told, much like what we're doing here. But there, the stories are not told. And so the parents and young people do not think about entrepreneurship as a career in the same way that we do here. And so you're discouraged from becoming an entrepreneur. Your parents want you to be a doctor, lawyer, engineer. And that's many cultures, I think.
It's changing though. It's changing. I think there are more and more entrepreneurs even in European countries, and it's becoming more and more an aspiration from the younger generation to be their own boss. So they're going to freelance a lot. They're going to do it their own way, but it's more and more in the DNA of the European countries for sure. But it's been in the DNA of the American people for decades now. So it's not new. It's in there. And what you get from that as well is ecosystems. The ecosystems of business owners and business operators is so much greater in the US, so that you have an access to talented people, coaches. Like all my coaches are Americans or Canadians. They're all from North America. And I've been going to North America to get exposed to the level of business that's going on there very, very often, which is something. And I've been exposed to the top of the top of the top of the cream in France, and I can see the difference, and there's a difference. Like North Americans are next level for sure. And that's what I'm aspiring to. So that's all the big difference I'm seeing there too.
That networking, that coaching, that mentoring, that is something that we emphasize even in
Yeah.
higher education with our
That's
students.
thinking bigger, like, removing your mental barriers or your limiting thoughts, all that kind of stuff. It's very, very ingrained in the American culture. It's not ingrained in the European culture. Like there are limiting thoughts everywhere.
But interestingly, as you pointed out, we have a lot of international students here at the University of Tampa where I teach, and we they are very interested in entrepreneurship. So I'm sure a lot of that is changing, but it takes a long time, and it's sort of in the DNA of who we are in this country, in the United States. So it's kind of interesting. Let's go back to Agorapulse. And, you mentioned that young people might want to do things their way. And I'm seeing a lot of side hustles. Did you start this company on the side a little bit while you were still an attorney?
No,
Or
I,
did you have to
I,
make a clean break and go for it?
I had to make a clean break, but I made a clean break, launched, because at the time you have to remember one thing. It was 2000, July of 2000, the first
Okay.
time I started my business. The internet was barely a thing in
Yeah, I
2000.
know. Yeah. I was around back then, and it was a little bit like today with AI, right?
Yeah.
If you
It
had
was,
the internet in something, it was a big deal.
I'd argue it was less than today with AI, because today with AI, we have the internet to spread things super fast.
That's
At the
right.
time, we didn't have that spreading power of the web that we have now.
Good
So
point.
it was less of what we have today, and definitely not as fast and not as, um, it was not permeating everything so fast, and the AI is doing right now. So we had to build everything. There was so much work, like your servers, you had to build them yourself. Your hosting, you have to take your servers and plug them into a hosting company and put them in wires so they can be connected to the backbone. it was, you have to build your own billing system. You have to build your own, credit card charging system, recurring charging system. Like everything had to be built because there was nothing that was built. So you couldn't do that as a side hustle. Today, though, you could do what we've done in 2000. You can totally do it today as a side hustle because all the infrastructure is here to web hosting. Here it is. Amazon AWS, like you can click a button and you have your website hosted. You want a beautiful website? Here you are. Buy a designer on Fiverr for $150 and you have a beautiful website. So what you can do in 2025 is so much
Yeah,
different from what we could do in 2000 that today you could totally do the site. You want to build a product, go in Lovable or Replit and build your own software, build your own SaaS. I have people in my team who build their own SaaS for fun to tell stories to their kids at night. It's what you can do today is so incredible and so fast that side hustles are totally possible. But back then it was not possible.
Yeah. I actually started a tech-based company as well in 2004. It was three, I guess 2003 is when we started. And it was, it was really organizing information on the web, basically, which would have been so easy to do today. And there were a lot of problems. So I think that's a really good point. But it is an interesting time that we're in. Let's talk a little bit about the growth of Agorapulse and the trajectory. I know I read that you started with Facebook
Yeah.
and focused on that. And that was back, like you said, in early 2000s. Now you're, you work with all the social media. So tell us what somebody can expect if they become a client of yours, a customer of yours.
Yeah, basically what we do today is we're social media management software. So we do everything from Facebook to Instagram to LinkedIn to TikTok to Pinterest to X, like all the social networks, reviews on Google My Business. We have a very broad range of social networks that we cover, and Threads and Blue Sky. Like it's hard to count these days. So we help brands and companies and agencies who do that for companies to manage the existing social media presence that they have. So they have a page on LinkedIn, they have a profile on Instagram, they have a page on Facebook, they have a profile on TikTok. We help them post content to those different profiles from one single unified place where you can have the same short video go to Facebook, YouTube Shorts, TikTok, Instagram Reels in one shot, or anything else, text and photos and carousels and all the different formats of content you can post there. So you can create all that. You can schedule, queue all that content to all these different networks that you have a presence on. And then we're going to get all the comments, all the reviews, all the private message, direct message, like all types of messaging that people can send back to you from social networks. We're going to get that all in one unified inbox. So you can reply, you can like, you can share, you can collaborate with the team on those replies. And then finally, we're going to help you analyze what's working, what's not working, what type of content you should post, what time of the day works best for you, what type of topic works best. So there's the whole analytics and insights part that helps you understand what you're doing well, what you're not doing so well, so you can improve and get better. So that's what we do today. And what we've been working on and are going to work on and focus on very much next year is help people build the most amazing content strategy on social that they can make by helping them build great content at scale. So large volume of very high quality content. The way I put it now is like, I want anyone to be highly interesting on social, even if they don't feel interesting today. So that's the ultimate goal.
So what are the biggest mistakes that most people make with their social media businesses? I mean, I know people make a lot of mistakes personally, but as businesses.
People make a lot of mistakes on social media in general and on social media for sure. I think the biggest mistake is to not think through the level of quality and quantity you're going to have to put out there to make it count. If you post once a week on LinkedIn, you're never going to get anything from it. It's not enough. It's too little of an effort. So if you expect social media to be a distribution channel for you, to be a go-to-market channel, there has to be volume. There absolutely has to be volume. That's the first thing. The second thing is that volume needs to be of a quality that's appealing to your ICP, to your ideal customer profile. So what you create, number one, has to be a lot of it, and it has to be what your ideal customers absolutely need to consume and want to see. The level of quality is a huge challenge in itself, because if you post a lot of junk, you're going to get a lot of junk back. There's good marketing can cover the junkness of your product on social media. If it's junk, nobody's going to watch it. Nobody's going to interact with it. The algorithm are going to, park it at the bottom of the well, and never, nobody's going to ever see it. So how can you do that is the question people need to ask themselves. Like, who are we talking to, and what is going to be something that's super duper interesting for them? At the end of the day, it's more of a content strategy issue than it is a social media specific issue, because that content strategy also applies to anything you do on your website, on your podcast, on your blog. So you could ask the same question for a podcast. If you want to have a successful podcast, what is the key ingredient? Well, the key ingredient, you know who you're talking to, and you know what these people need to hear and what they would pay for if it was not free. So how can you create that? What I tell my social media team and my content team all the time is that our content and social media strategy is very easy. Create stuff that they would pay for if it was not free. And if they would not pay for it, then it's probably not worth creating. So
Yeah.
think about it this way.
That's such great advice, but I think it also goes back to what you said about identifying your ideal customer. And that is what I have seen a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with. Did you struggle with that at all? Because Agorapulse could, appeal to such a wide variety of businesses.
Yeah. Yeah. And we are very focused on mid-market businesses. So businesses that are 150 or 200 employees or more, because those are the businesses where the problems we solve start to be a problem. If you are a solopreneur and you have a couple of social profiles to grow your solopreneur business, social media is probably not your main focus, and it's probably not a big problem for you. You can probably use free native platforms to do what you have to do. And what we can solve as a product is not going to be, as of today, it's not going to be something that you're ready to pay a lot of money for. So it's not a great business for us. So we tend to address companies that have problems that are more painful, because they have a team, because they have multinational presence, multi-brand presence. So they have a lot of profiles. Their presence is very scattered. And so that is more painful for them than someone who is their own thing and have one Facebook, one Instagram, and one LinkedIn, and that's
So,
it. So
how did you test that when you developed that theory that this was your ideal customer? How did you test that?
well, you test that by marketing to those people and having a list of those people who look like that, and define what should go in that list. So for us, it's geographies. So it's North America and Western Europe. It's company size above a certain size, and it's certain verticals, certain industries. So once we have those industries, geographies, and company sizes, we market to them specifically, and then we look at conversion rates in the funnel, and we see, do we convert better when we look at the average conversion that we get from anyone, like any geo, any company size, and do we get revenue retention that's higher for those than it is? And when we start looking at big data, like a lot of data, we see the patterns of who retains more, who closes faster, why, and then you start understanding who is your ideal customer profile. So you always start with an assumption or a gut feeling, and then you evaluate that in the market. Say, okay, I think in Germany, manufacturing businesses are pretty good for us. Okay, let's go. Let's do manufacturing Germany for Q4. And you create content that's appealing for manufacturing companies in German, and you interview people who are doing social media for manufacturing companies in German, and you do use cases with your customers who are in Germany and are in the manufacturing business. And so you do that, and you combine those marketing and sales effort around that. And then after Q4, you look at, you're probably going to look at Q1, because it takes more than a month or two to close, but in mid-market. But after the quarter is done, you wait maybe another quarter to see how that funnel behaves. And at the end of Q1 2026, you look at all the funnel metrics for this experiment, and you say, oh, does manufacturing in Germany works well for us in terms of conversion rate, average revenue per account, than the average other verticals and countries that we have? You iterate on that, and you build up your ICPs, and you retest it once in a while, because sometimes, things change, market change. And what was true in 2018 is not true in 2026 anymore.
And so you pivot. Have you had some
And you
pivot?
change, yeah, you change the way you go to market. Yeah, absolutely. That's what we've done already 5 times.
Yeah. Okay. So data is gold, right? I mean, you got to have data, and we live
Yeah.
in a
And,
world.
and today with AI connected to your data, you can have answers to your questions almost instantly. So it's very, very effective.
Let's talk about AI. We're in that agentic AI phase now. How important is AI in the work that you do? How do you use it? How do you think about it?
It's absolutely crucial. I use it every day, and I push my team all the time to use it every day as well. And even have someone in the company who is he's not our chief AI officer because that makes no sense, but is our AI person. And his role is to go in every team all the time to audit what they do and to identify areas of their work where AI could alleviate the manual work or the painful work and make it easier. We basically we change our business processes using AI all the time. So we make AI our best partner to reduce the number of manual tasks or boring tasks or unnecessary tasks that AI can do for us, or to help us do things that we couldn't do before because it was impossible. It was crazy. It didn't make any sense given the time it took and the outcome it would give. Now that AI can do it in 5 minutes for 25 cents, now it makes sense. So now we do new things thanks to that. So um,
So,
to give you
yeah,
yeah, I
go
can
ahead.
give you a couple of examples like we that are very, very easy to understand. So we got RFPs, requests for proposal, all the time for large companies or medium-sized companies. And they send the RFP and they send that to 4 or 5 different, competitors of ours and say, okay, we want to reply to this RFP. Here's the RFP, 52 pages of, expectation, product features that we need and financial offers that we can accept and legal compliance and yada, yada, yada. Those RFPs are just a horrible thing because the way it worked before is would give that to a salesperson. The salesperson would take an entire week to read the 52 pages and try to estimate, is this a right fit for us or not? Now we have an RFP agent. We send the 52 pages of RFP to the agent, and in less than a minute, we get a percentage of match between our product and their expectations. We get a percentage of match between their compliance requirement and our ability to fulfill those, and so on and so forth. So it's basically say, okay, you're 89% a good fit for that. You should respond. Or you're 55%. You should not respond. So in basically a minute and a couple cents, we have an analysis of the RFP that tells us if it's a good fit for us or not, which before would take 2 or 3 days. So that's one example of how AI is revolutionizing how you improve your processes. And obviously we have AI in support all over the place. So we have an amazing support team, but it was a very large. It was 27 people at one point, and for the past year, every one person who left the support team, we didn't replace because we replaced them with AI. So like it's also replacing and the good thing is it's replacing the repetitive, it's always the same question, the kind of stuff that great support people don't really enjoy doing because it's not fun. It's not digging into the
Right.
complexity of, oh, there is an interesting bug I can dig into here. So what it does, it elevates the humans because now the humans do what humans can do, which is the complex and fun stuff. And they don't do what the machine can do, which is the boring and manual or repetitive stuff.
Yeah, exactly. I love it. I think it's so exciting. And I think most companies today are looking at how they can build agents to do these tasks within their companies. And
It's a
it's
lot of work.
pretty amazing.
I'd say to people, don't fool yourself.
Yeah.
It's not push button. You have to make it work, and it
And
takes
the
a lot of
data
work.
has to be in the right form, right? So
Data,
that's
the
probably
context.
a
Yeah,
lot of,
AI is like a trainee. If you don't tell them where to find the things, they won't find them.
I liken my AI to one of the best graduate assistants I've ever had, but I have to check everything.
Yeah,
So
same thing. Yeah,
it's great.
but once it's trained, it's very effective.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great example that you gave us. So you mentioned competition talking about the RFPs, which is where I wanted to go next. You're operating in a world where there is a lot of competition, a lot of noise. We all are actually. Thanks, social media gives us a chance to all participate, even as a side hustle, as you talked about. But how do you differentiate what you do, and how have you dealt with competition? How do you think about that? And for our listeners, how would you recommend businesses think about competition today?
Yeah. Well, first of all, you have to think about it. That's advice number one. How are you unique and different to the audience that you want to serve? And that's something that you absolutely need to be very clear on. Because if you're like, oh, I'm just like X, but for Y, or something that's not really exciting, or that you're, or if you, worse, if you're not clear about who is your target audience, that's going to be a problem. So first of all, you need to be clear about who is your target audience. And then based on who is your target audience, you need to be very mindful of what their pains and needs are and create something that's unique to them. Not the whole thing that needs to be unique to them, but the way you address that audience and the way you help them with their pains has to be
And
unique, or
the way you create your content, right?
yeah, it has to have some level of uniqueness. If it does not, and you're just like them, but $10 cheaper, it's not going to be a good business. So the way we've done that is I've always, especially in the early days when I was in charge of everything, I've always tried to find ways so we can solve the problem we solve in a different way, not necessarily a better way. I was not looking for a better way. I was looking for a different way that would be better for the people we wanted to serve at the time. In 2014, we were the first social media management company that released a social media inbox. So we had a unified inbox. We're the first product to have a unified inbox where all your messages and comments and everything goes into one place. Everybody and their sister copied that in 2016. I think Sprout Social copied us 2 years after we released it, 2016. And Hootsuite copied us in 2019. Took them 6 years to copy us. So they were not that fast in innovating in that front. But that was our uniqueness until, let's say, 2019, basically. What we did in 2020 is I actually filed a patent for this one. We created a feature that helps you define the return on investment that you have from social media to whatever goes to your website, revenue, conversion, subscription, trials, whatever are the conversion elements that you measure on your business, for your business, on your site or your product or your software. We build a system that you can connect what you did on social and the impact it had on your conversion. So that's something we launched in 2020. That's also unique to us because I filed a patent for it. And what we're building now that we believe is going to be unique to us is to help brands and marketers to again create high quality content at scale using AI, because that problem of all the social media management software, the industry we are on, they all solve the same problems. You got content, we'll help you spread it on social. We help you get everything back, comments, DMs, PMs, all that stuff, reviews. And then we help you measure. On paper, we all do those three things. I'd say the one thing we do better than anyone else is the inbox, the engagement piece, because we invented that in 2014 and we kept being ahead of the curve for that, and the ROI measurement. But I realized the ROI measurement was only of interest to few marketers who are actually measuring stuff. And you'd be amazed how many marketers don't measure anything or measure it very wrongly. It's
Yeah.
unfortunate, but that's a fact that I discovered when I launched this feature, that very few people had a good framework of measurement on their own website. So if you're not measuring on your website, then we're not going to help, because you're not going to measure on social media either. If you're not measuring what your emails and your ads are doing, then that's sorry, but I can't help you with social media. But the thing we're not helping people with is like, how do you create content? How do you, the step before the spreading on social? And that's the thing we want to solve next.
Yeah, that's super interesting, and also interesting that you've been a leader in the industry. You've kind of taken on that space of developing new products. And with your patent, I just have to ask, because you are an international company, and I'm sure it's helpful that you're an attorney because you can speak the language with a patent attorney to work with them. Was this an international patent? Was it a U.S. patent? A U.S. patent. So what is for our listeners, we live in an international world. If you're doing things digitally and you've got an online business, let's say, I don't know that I think everybody is online, but if you're trying to build a global company and your customers may be anywhere in the world, do you have any advice for, early stage entrepreneur in terms of setting up their company, not creating a legal entity, but establishing themselves well to deal with an international platform?
Yeah, well, make English your working language. That's the only advice I have. So
Okay.
it's an advice for non-English native speakers. But as a French person, I can see around me that many French companies don't have English as their working language, or they work in French, and everything is documented in French. Everything in the code is in French. If you start hiring people from abroad, or you set up a branch in the US and everything you have, all the context you have to share is in French, you're going to be in big trouble. So I'd say if you're not native English, English should be your working language, not Brazilian, Portuguese, or Spanish, or Italian, or French, or German, or Swedish, or anything. That's really the main thing, because that's the language of international business. It is. So that's the main advice. And there are plenty of other things, but it's it's too much for
Yeah.
it's too much for
We
now.
could do a
Yeah.
whole other podcast about that.
Uh,
One more question about the international nature of your company. How have you thought about culture? And have you deliberately built culture? And if so, what is because you've got how many employees now and where are they located?
70, I think. Yeah, it's absolutely deliberate. It's who you are. It's based on you. It's based on the founding team for sure. But then you have to document it. You have to make it real. You have to make it so you can share it, so you can spread it, so you can measure it in a way. So yeah, it's something we did. You probably do very, very organically until 10, 15 people. But after that, and it's probably non-written, it's in the air. It's how people behave, basically. The culture is how people behave, and especially how people behave when you're not there,
Right, right.
or when nobody is here to look. But once you get above a certain level, some number of people, then you have to write it down. Like, don't make it fancy. Write it down on a Google Doc. Just a couple of bullet points. How do we operate? What's important for us? And find 3 or 4 values max that are really differentiates you. And usually what I say is try to make values that you could say the opposite. It would be fine too, but it defines you. So for example, Facebook was move fast, break things. And it's a great value, because you could say move slow and be secure, or be reliable. And that's the opposite of moving fast and breaking things, but it's valid as well. It's just, if your value is be honest, it's not a value. It's a prerequisite.
Right. It is. Yes.
So for example, one of our values is freaking care. It's not just care, it's freaking care. So you care more than the average. And that's a filter, because not every company expect that from their employees. It's a filter. If people come and do 9 to 5 and don't care more than that, usually we don't keep them because they don't fit.
Yeah, I love that. So it's got to be deliberate, and it's got to be articulated, and it's got to be shared. And it is driven by the founders, typically, especially in a startup and an
Look,
entrepreneurial
yeah.
company. So I like that move fast and break things. It leads me to a question I always like to ask about, and that's how you think about failure. And I just have to ask you, is failure in your mind, is failure thought about differently in the United States versus France and Europe?
Yeah, definitely. There was a cultural difference. I think it's less and less true now because of the influence, the U.S. business influence to every country, especially European countries. But there's definitely more of a, feeling is bad, and has a bad brand to it in Europe and in France. But when you are in an entrepreneur network, in an entrepreneur environment, everybody knows that failing is okay and it's a necessary step towards success. So I think from a cultural society thing, probably it's not so well accepted. But once you become an entrepreneur and you surround yourself with people, like-minded people who are also entrepreneurs, everybody is okay with. It's not more than okay. They know that it is a necessary
It's part
necessary
of
evil.
the
Yeah,
journey.
it's part of the journey, totally. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's the way we learn
Mm.
best, probably. The key is that we don't want it to be a fatal failure, but if we fail fast and break things, as you talked about, then you're going to learn sooner, and you're gonna learn before the
Yeah.
stakes are still lower, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's really incredible. Another, I heard Liz Smith say, one of the female CEOs leading one of our major public companies here in the US, or a couple of different companies, say that they did autopsy without blame. So when something didn't go right, they investigated it, but they didn't personalize it. And I think that's the difference. I think when failure is personalized, that's when it's so painful. But when we can attach it to something that we've done and make changes, and it can be really valuable. So this has been an amazing conversation. I've really enjoyed it. I could talk much longer. Emeric, I've learned so much today, and I know our listeners have as well. I always like to ask our guests, because there's a lot of young entrepreneurs and startups and aspiring entrepreneurs who listen to this podcast. If you had one piece of advice to share with someone who's in the early stages or considering an entrepreneurial venture, what would that be? You've
Find a
given us
great
a lot
co-founder.
already.
Find a great co-founder.
Find a great co-founder.
Yeah.
Tell me why that matters.
Network as much as you can before you even start building anything, to meet a lot of great people. So when you are ready or want to launch something, you already have a line of, a Rolodex of great people who could potentially be partnering with you. Because you cannot, especially if you're not going to raise funding, which is 99.99%, you cannot build something great on your own. It's impossible. You need to be at least two or three, depending on how hard it is what you want to build. So you gotta have people with you in the journey that are going to support the journey. So finding those people is going to be the one thing that you need to invest on. The same way CEOs need to invest on building their team. When you're a founder, you need to invest on building a founding team, especially if you're the leading one. The second piece of advice is define who's expected from who when you start that founding team. Like what is people expect from the other founders, so at least you're not having anger and disappointment and misalignment rot the relationship too early. So those would be the two pieces of advice.
It always goes back to people, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And relationships,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, if we got the right people on the bus, we can figure it out.
Totally.
So I have to ask one last question. Where did the name of the company come from?
Yeah, Agora in ancient Greek is the place where people gathered in Athens and the old Greek cities to discuss the matter of the city. And we thought, we want to be the pulse of where people gather. And where people gather, when we launched the company in 2011, 12, was already on social media. So we want to give you a pulse of where people meet and exchange and converse and discuss and help you grasp that and manage that. So that was a very intellectual way of finding a name.
That's a great name. I love it. And finding the right name matters too. So I love it. Congratulations. Where can our listeners find out more about you, connect with you, find Agorapulse?
They can go on agorapulse.com, agorapulse.com, and they can find me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to accept invitation on LinkedIn when people add a message to it that they heard about me on the podcast, or like when they add a personal note, that's actually personal. If it's not, I never accept the invitation. So, because I have too many, but that's how you can get a hold of me.
Yeah, that sounds great. Well, Emeric, thank you for joining me today. It was a great conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Rebecca. It was my pleasure.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of The In Factor. I hope Emeric's insights on ROI, data, and building systems sparked some new ideas for you, especially when it comes to making your social media strategy actually work for your business and for you. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with someone who might benefit. And don't forget to follow or subscribe so you never miss a conversation of the In Factor. And just a quick reminder, the iLab is coming. It's designed to help you grow your entrepreneurial intelligence. And believe me, I've been teaching for many, many years, and I think this is really an exciting opportunity for anyone who wants to practice entrepreneurship or who is aspiring to be an entrepreneur. I can't wait to share more soon. And until next time, I'm Rebecca White. Thanks for being part of the In Factor community.